My husband died hating me. 3 nights after his funeral, our bedroom door opened by itself at exactly 3 a.m. So slowly it didn't even squeak, and I heard the weight of someone sitting down on his side of the bed. The mattress dipped. The air went cold. And even in the dark, I knew the shape beside me wasn't from the living world anymore. I've never told anyone this in real life. Not my sister, not my pastor, not even my therapist. But I'm going to tell you. And I hope you're ready to hear what I did and what came back because of it. Before I begin, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. And if stories like this stay with you, please like and subscribe. It really helps me continue sharing the truths I've carried for years. Now, let me take you back to the night that changed everything. It was early spring in Ohio, one of those raw March nights where the wind still had teeth. The house felt too big without him, every hallway suddenly longer, every room louder in its silence. My name is Lauren. I was 47 then, and for the first time in over 20 years, I was the only living person sleeping under that roof. Mark, my husband, had been gone for exactly 3 days. Not long enough for the casseroles to stop arriving, not long enough for the flowers to start wilting, but long enough for the reality to start sinking in. He died angry, and the last words he heard from me were words I wish I could rip back out of the air. The clock on my nightstand glowed 2:58 a.m. The house was settled and still, the way houses get in the middle of the night. No cars on the street, no heating kicking on, just that deep, heavy quiet that feels like it's listening. I wasn't sleeping. I hadn't really slept since the hospital. I lay on my side, staring at the outline of his empty pillow, tracing the faint dip where his head used to rest. I could still smell his aftershave on the pillowcase, a sharp, clean scent that hurt more than it comforted. My mind kept looping back to his face in the hospital bed. His chest tight, the rise and fall of the machines doing work his heart couldn't finish. The way his eyes had looked at me, full of a kind of hurt I didn't want to name. I should have been there sooner. I should have answered the phone the first time he called. That's where my thoughts were when I heard it. A soft click, like metal slipping against metal. I jerked my head toward the door. It was closed. I knew it was closed. I'd shut it myself, the way I always did, because I couldn't stand sleeping with it open. Ever since I was a little girl, open doors in the dark made me feel exposed, watched. But there it was again. That tiny, deliberate click, right at the level of the doorknob. For a second, I told myself it was just the house settling. Old wood, old hinges. We'd lived there for almost 15 years. I knew its sounds like I knew Mark's footsteps. This wasn't one of those sounds. The doorknob turned. Slowly, intentionally. I saw the faint shine of it twist in the glow from the digital clock. My throat went dry. I didn't call out. I didn't move. I just watched, frozen, as the door eased inward, millimeter by millimeter, without a single creak. It stopped half open. The hallway beyond was just a dark rectangle. Nothing moved. No shapes, no shadows. Just the blackness of the house at 3 a.m. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I told myself it was the draft from the upstairs windows, even though they were all shut. I told myself I'd forgotten to latch the door, even though I remembered the click when I turned off the light. Then the mattress dipped beside me. Not a little shift, not the subtle settling of springs. It was the weight of a grown man, exactly where Mark used to sit when he came to bed late, easing himself down so he wouldn't wake me. The bed tilted just slightly toward that side, the way it always had when he was alive. The air around me changed. The room went so cold I could see my breath in a faint, white puff. That shouldn't have been possible. The heat was set to 70. I remember because I checked the thermostat twice. I was jumpy about everything, terrified something else might go wrong in a world that had already gone too far. I stayed straight ahead. I don't know why I didn't turn to look at it, at him, at whatever it was. Maybe some part of me knew that if I saw what was there, there'd be no going back to pretending I was alone. I smelled him. Not flowers, not old pipes, not dust. Him, Mark. That same mix of laundry detergent and that cheap aftershave he always bought at the drugstore, the one I teased him about. It wrapped around me, sharp and undeniable, pressing against my lungs until I almost sobbed. A sound slipped out of my throat, half breath, half word. Mark. I hadn't meant to say his name out loud, but the second it left my mouth, the weight on the mattress shifted, like someone had leaned closer. Something brushed the back of my neck. It was as light as a breath, but it had that unmistakable sense of presence, of intention. The way a person's hand might hover just above your skin before touching you. My skin prickled with goosebumps, every hair standing on end. I wanted to apologize. I wanted to tell him I was sorry, that I hadn't meant what I said in the hospital, that I never thought those would be the last words he heard from me. But the apology stuck in my chest, choked off by fear and guilt and a strange, awful awareness that this might not be a second chance. This might be punishment. The clock flipped to 3 a.m. At that exact second, the weight vanished. The cold lifted, just slightly. The smell of his aftershave thinned like smoke. The mattress eased back to its normal shape, springing upward in a slow exhale. I was alone again. Or at least, I told myself I was. I lay there rigid, listening, barely blinking, while the house went back to being just a house. Creaks, distant hum of the fridge, occasional hiss from the vents. Normal sounds. Daytime sounds that didn't fit the hour. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I kept my eyes on that open bedroom door, watching the dark, waiting for the slightest movement. Nothing came. But when the sun finally started to show itself through the blinds, I realized something that made my stomach twist. Whatever had been with me in that room, it hadn't felt like comfort. It hadn't felt like goodbye. It had felt unfinished. And deep down, beneath all my excuses and rationalizations, I knew exactly why. Because Mark died thinking I wanted him to. And the house wasn't going to let me forget that. If you're still here, listening, you need to know. What happened that first night at 3 a.m. was only the beginning. The morning after that first night, I moved through the house like a ghost myself. Slow, distracted, barely aware of the world around me. The sunlight felt wrong in those rooms. Too bright, too warm, too alive for a place that had felt so cold only hours earlier. I tried to convince myself it had been a dream. People have sleep paralysis, night terrors, stress hallucinations. Grief does strange things to the mind. At least, that's what every pamphlet at the funeral home seemed eager to tell me. But dreams don't open doors. Dreams don't sit down beside you. Dreams don't smell like your dead husband. Still, I told myself it didn't matter. I had things to do, papers to sign, calls to return, a headstone to choose, all the awful chores that come with widowhood. I moved on autopilot, fixed my hair, put on the same pair of clean jeans I'd been rotating since the wake, and drove myself to the lawyer's office. Every errand drained me. Every conversation felt like I was borrowing someone else's voice. But worst of all was the silence waiting for me at home each time I walked back through the front door. That house wasn't meant to hold only one person. You could feel the imbalance in it. Too much space, too much air, too many empty chairs. Mark and I had built a life in that Ohio Colonial. A simple life, nothing flashy. He was a mechanic with a stubborn streak and a laugh that came from deep in his chest. I worked part-time at the library, mostly shelving books and helping the older regulars with the computers. We were ordinary, predictable, at least on the outside. Inside our marriage, things had been quieter the last few years. Not explosive or dramatic, just strained. Like two people rowing in different directions without realizing it. We loved each other, but life kept getting heavier, and neither of us was good at admitting when we were drowning. Money was always tight. We wanted kids, but it never happened. Mark's mother got sick, then worse. I started working more hours. He started coming home later. And somewhere in all that day-to-day exhaustion, we stopped talking the way we used to. I regret that more than anything. Even the fight we had the day before he died. Especially that. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Standing in the kitchen that afternoon, holding a cup of coffee I wasn't really drinking, I caught myself staring at the chair he always pulled out too far from the table. He used to do it without thinking, and I'd roll my eyes and nudge it back into place. It was a tiny, stupid habit, but seeing the chair sitting flush against the table made me feel physically sick. I pulled it out, just an inch, just so the room felt right again. I told myself the lingering ache in my chest was normal. Widowhood hurts. Guilt hurts more. That's all it was. But sometime around 4 in the afternoon, I felt something shift in the air behind me. A pressure, the faintest tension, like someone standing too close. I turned fast, expecting to see. The thought hit me before I could stop it. Him. Of course no one was there. Just the back door, the coat hooks, the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Still, I felt watched. A micropause settled between my breaths. That same cold feeling from the night before brushed against my skin, then faded just as quickly. I told myself, grief, grief, grief. People imagine their loved ones all the time. They hear their voice in another room. They see them in crowds. They smell their cologne in empty hallways. The mind makes ghosts long before the dead do. I tried to shake it off, went upstairs, and changed into something more comfortable. Every room held a piece of him. The flannel shirts he refused to throw out, the tools scattered on his dresser, the dent in the carpet where his boots always Saturday. For a moment, I stood in the doorway just looking at our bedroom. It didn't feel like mine anymore. It didn't feel like ours, either. It felt unsettled. But I stepped inside anyway and made the bed, something I hadn't bothered with since the funeral. I smoothed the sheets, fluffed his pillow, and tried not to notice that faint indentation where a weight had pressed down just hours earlier. My hands were shaking. Then, as I pulled the covers tight, I felt a sudden gust of cold air sweep across the room. Not a draft. This was sharper, cleaner, directed. Like someone had walked past me fast enough to stir the air. I froze. I didn't breathe. The window was closed. The vent didn't kick on. Nothing in the room had moved. But the cold lingered, settling right where his side of the bed was. My heart thudded in my ears. I forced myself to leave the room, closing the door behind me. Not fully, but enough that I could pretend I wasn't scared of what might be on the other side. I tried to go about my day. Paid bills, sorted mail, ate half a sandwich I couldn't taste. But the whole house felt wrong. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was expectant, waiting, and deep down, though I tried to bury the thought under logic and grief counseling advice, I already knew. The thing that visited me at 3 a.m. wasn't finished. And the next sign, the one that would pull me past denial, was coming sooner than I was prepared for. I didn't go into the bedroom that evening until I absolutely had to. The way the cold had swept through earlier stayed lodged in the back of my mind like a splinter. Every time I walked past that door, I felt a prick of dread, a subtle tightening in my stomach, as if something on the other side was aware of me. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself a lot of things that weren't true. By the time night came, the house was unnervingly quiet. Even the usual sounds, neighbors' dogs barking, distant cars passing, seemed muted, like the world was holding its breath. I made a cup of herbal tea I never ended up drinking and settled into the living room with the TV on low, hoping the background noise would anchor me. But grief has a way of amplifying silence no matter what you do. It was around 11:40 p.m. when I first heard it, a soft thud from upstairs. Not loud, not sharp, just a dull, deliberate weight shifting where no weight should be. I muted the TV instinctively, held my breath, listened. Nothing. A few seconds crawled by before I exhaled. Houses make noise, I reminded myself. Wood contracts. Pipes tap. It was probably nothing. Then came the second thud. Heavier. Directly above me. That was our bedroom. A cold pulse slid down my arms, the kind that tightens the skin around your elbows. My first impulse was to call someone. My sister, maybe. But what would I even say? Hey, something's walking around in my bedroom, but I'm sure it's just my dead husband's ghost. No big deal. I forced myself to stand, the way you force your legs to move on a winter morning when everything feels stiff. My feet felt anchored to the carpet, but I made myself climb the stairs anyway, gripping the railing harder than necessary. Halfway up, I stopped, because I heard footsteps. Slow, paced steps. One, then a pause, then another, crossing the room above me. It wasn't a scampering animal, not the house settling, not anything natural. It had rhythm, weight, intention. My breath hitched in my throat. I whispered, "Muck," before I could stop myself. The footsteps stopped. A long, horrible pause followed, the kind that feels like the air itself is listening. Then, from the direction of the bedroom door, something tapped. Once, twice, 3 times. Soft knuckles against wood. I nearly lost my balance on the stairs. I turned and went back down, fast but not running. If I ran, I felt like something would chase me. I didn't stop until I reached the bottom and stood in the living room again, heart battering against my ribs. I stared up at the ceiling, waiting, but the footsteps didn't come back. No tapping, no thuds, just that suffocating quiet. After a few minutes of convincing myself I was safe, I grabbed a blanket and tried to sleep on the couch. It felt childish, but the idea of going into that bedroom was unbearable. Even from downstairs, I kept glancing toward the staircase, expecting to see something standing there in the dim light. Midnight passed, then 1 a.m. I drifted in and out of shallow, uneasy sleep, waking every time a car went by or the fridge clicked on. At 2:53 a.m., I woke up fully alert, like something had shaken me awake by the shoulders. My heart was already racing, and I hadn't heard anything yet. I didn't know why I was awake, until I noticed the air in the living room felt colder. The kind of cold that sinks through the fibers of your clothes, not the kind caused by a thermostat error. Then, from upstairs, the bedroom door creaked. Slowly, too slowly, my eyes moved to the staircase. I couldn't see the door from where I was, but I could picture it perfectly, the handle turning, the wood shifting inward, the darkness spreading into the hallway. I sat frozen, waiting for footsteps, for breathing, for anything. But there was nothing. Instead, something else happened. Something worse in a quieter way. My phone lit up on the coffee table. A notification. Then another. Then a third. All voicemails. All from Mark. The timestamps were from months before, numbers I'd ignored during a fight. Calls I hadn't answered because I was angry and prideful and too stubborn for my own good. They shouldn't have shown up again. They were marked as listened to and deleted. But there they were, glowing on the screen. One after another after another. As I reached for the phone, a cold draft brushed past my legs, lifting the corner of the blanket. Like someone walking by. Like someone circling the couch to stand behind me. The room thickened with that same pressure I'd felt earlier. A presence, heavy and silent. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Instead, I clicked on the first voicemail. Static crackled. Then Mark's voice, low and strained. "Lauren, please. Just answer. I don't feel right." The second message, "I'm scared something's wrong. I don't want to be alone." My throat closed up. Tears blurred the screen. The third message was just breathing. Unsteady. Weak. Then, barely audible. "Why won't you talk to me?" The phone slipped from my hand. Behind me, the air went colder, denser, like something was leaning in, close enough to touch the back of my neck. And that was the moment, hearing my dead husband's voice begging for me in the dark, that I realized the line between the living and the dead had already begun to blur. And whatever was upstairs, whatever kept opening that bedroom door, it wasn't just haunting the house. It was haunting me. Sleep stopped being something I did. It became something I chased and never caught. Every night blurred into the next, a cycle of dread that settled over the house like a fog. I'd nap in brief, exhausted bursts, 20 minutes here, 10 minutes there, always waking with the same rush of panic, convinced something was inches from my face. The first pattern I noticed was the cold. It didn't drift or fade. It appeared, suddenly, decisively, like a door opening from someplace that wasn't meant to open. It happened in different rooms, at different times, but the temperature drop always felt the same, sharp, intrusive, and strangely familiar, like the lingering chill of hospital hallways. The kind of cold that seeped into your bones and stayed there. The second pattern was the door. I started keeping it closed during the day, too. Something about seeing it open, even a crack, set every nerve on edge. But no matter how many times I shut it, No matter how firmly I turned the knob, I'd look up an hour later and find it standing half open. Always half, never more, never less, as if someone were watching me from the darkness inside but didn't want to step out fully. At first, I told myself I was forgetting to close it all the way. Grief brain, stress. But I tested that theory, closed it tight, jiggled the knob, pushed against it. And still, I'd return from making coffee or folding laundry to see it open again, that same subtle angle, like a silent invitation or accusation. The third pattern was the time. 3 a.m. exactly. Not 2:59. Not 3:01. My phone would glow on the nightstand even when I tried sleeping in the bedroom again, which only lasted one disastrous night. My eyes would snap open seconds before the numbers changed, like something was shaking me from inside my own chest. And always, right at 3 a.m., footsteps. Soft, measured, dragging just slightly, the way Mark used to walk when his knees were acting up. I tried to document the sounds one night, recording on my phone, but the playback was only static and faint clicking, like a heartbeat under the floorboards. The kind of clicking you hear on the last seconds of a voicemail you can never bring yourself to delete. Every time I listened, it made my eyes sting. But the worst part wasn't the noises. It was the feeling. For years, Mark and I slept on the left and right sides like most couples do. You fall into habits and routines without thinking. But as the nights wore on, I started waking on the far right edge of the bed, my old side. Except now I wasn't alone. The mattress behind me would have a dip, indentation, whoops, as if someone had been lying there. I try not to look, try not to push my hand back into that empty shape, but sometimes habit won. Sometimes grief did. And every time I reached out, my hand met nothing, yet the warmth lingered on my palms afterward, like the absence itself was alive. My guilt twisted deeper, because I wanted to believe it was him. But I also knew it wasn't. Not fully, not in a way that meant anything good. One afternoon, nearly 2 weeks after the funeral, I found myself standing at the kitchen counter, staring at Mark's old toolbox. He'd left it open the day before he died, too tired to put everything back in place. I remember nagging him about it. I'd been so annoyed about something so small. And now I'd give anything to see him forget to close it one more time. I reached out to shut the lid, and the moment my fingers touched the metal handle, the lights flickered. Not the whole house, just the kitchen. 3 rapid blinks. Pause. Then one long, sustained dimming that made the shadows stretch across the floor like they were reaching. I froze. A low hum vibrated through the counter. Not electrical, something else. Something deeper. The kind of vibration you feel more in your ribs than your ears. I whispered, "Mark," even though saying his name hurt every time. The lights flared back to normal. Then the toolbox slammed shut. Hard. I yelped and stumbled backward, hitting the fridge. The sound echoed through the kitchen like a gunshot, loud and final. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. My pulse pounded in my throat, my fingertips tingling. The toolbox sat still on the counter, closed as neatly as if someone had pressed both palms against it. My eyes stung. My voice shook. "I know you're angry," I whispered. "I know." The air behind me grew cold. And even without turning around, I knew the cold was concentrated, focused, right where he used to stand when we argued. Arms crossed, eyes hard, a wall between us neither of us knew how to break. I felt watched, not with love, not with longing, with accusation, because the truth was clawing its way to the surface, whether I wanted it or not. I hadn't answered his calls that night. I hadn't gone home when he asked. I hadn't listened when he said something felt wrong. I'd let my anger speak louder than his fear. Tears blurred my vision. I pressed both hands over my face and sank to the floor. "I'm sorry," I whispered into my palms. "I'm so sorry." For a moment, the cold eased, softened, almost like forgiveness brushing against my shoulder. But then, a single sound echoed through the house. The bedroom door upstairs creaked open. Slow, steady, awaiting me. And I realized the haunting wasn't about signs anymore. It wasn't about footsteps or cold or time. It was escalating, becoming intentional. Whatever Mark had become, he wasn't just angry. He was trying to tell me something, or show me something, and I was terrified I already knew what it was. The night the toolbox slammed shut, something in me broke, but not in the way I expected. I didn't collapse into fear the way I had before. I didn't run to the car or call a friend or pack a bag. Instead, I sat on the kitchen floor for a long time, breathing through the tightness in my chest, letting the cold air press against my back like a challenge. I realized something important, something bone deep and uncomfortably clear. If Mark wanted to scare me away, he could have. He hadn't. He wanted me to engage, to respond, to see what he needed me to see. And no matter how terrified I was, no matter how wrong this haunting felt, a part of me understood I owed him that. I couldn't hide from him forever. And maybe, just maybe, if I faced whatever he wanted to show me, the haunting would stop. A strange resolve settled in my bones. Quiet, steady, almost cold. I wiped my face, stood up, and took a long, shaky breath. If Mark was trapped, angry, or reaching from somewhere in between, then I needed to meet him halfway. But not blindly, not without a plan. A micropause stretched through the room. The kitchen suddenly felt different, less like a battlefield and more like a negotiation table. I walked to the dining room, pulled out my old notebook from the drawer, and drew a line down the page. On one side, I wrote patterns. On the other, meanings. My handwriting shook, but I forced myself to list each thing I'd noticed. The cold spots, the bedroom door, 3 a.m., footsteps, voicemails reappearing, the indentation on the bed, his lingering scent, lights flickering, objects closing or moving. Then I tried to make sense of them, not irrationally, but honestly. What did he want? What was he trying to draw me toward? Every sign pointed back to the bedroom. Every pattern circled the moment he died. Every sound and movement pulled me toward the same place, the last night we spoke. The night I said things I can't take back. My chest tightened as I wrote it down. My anger from that night, the ugly edge of it, felt foreign now, something belonging to a past version of myself who didn't understand how final words could become. I whispered into the empty room, "Mark, if you're trying to tell me something from that night, I'm listening now. I swear I am." The lights dimmed, just slightly, not threatening, responsive. And that was enough to convince me. I needed to go into that bedroom. Fully, voluntarily, at the hour he kept choosing. 3 a.m. A new kind of dread crawled into my stomach, but the decision settled over me like a weighted blanket. Terrifying, yes, but grounding too. For the first time since the funeral, I felt a direction. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing without admitting to myself that's what I was doing. I cleaned the house, opened blinds, made sure my phone was charged, checked the locks, not because I thought any of it would stop Mark, but because it made me feel more in control. Control was something I'd lost the night he died, something I desperately wanted back. As evening approached, I made myself a simple dinner I barely touched. My stomach was knotted too tight. The house felt watchful again, but not hostile, more like curious. Around 9 p.m., I went upstairs and stood in the hallway outside the bedroom. The door was open, of course, just slightly, the same familiar angle. The darkness inside seemed to pulse with something thick and waiting. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. This was where we'd argued, where he'd slept his last night alive, where I'd found the indentation, where he'd come back. I stepped inside, one foot, then the other. The cold greeted me immediately, not overwhelming this time, controlled, as if it were holding itself back, watching how far I was willing to go. "I'll be here at 3, I whispered into the room. "If you need to show me something, I'll see it. I promise." The feeling in the air shifted again, lighter, almost relieved. And for a moment, just one impossible moment, the faint smell of his aftershave drifted through the room. Not suffocating like before, just present, familiar. I sat on the edge of the bed, letting that scent pull memories forward, good ones and terrible ones. How he teased me for overthinking everything. How I'd snapped at him the night before he died. How he'd reached for me in the hospital and I'd stepped back, too hurt, too angry, too sure we'd have more time. You always think you'll have more time. A wave of grief rolled through me so strong I had to bend forward, pressing my forehead into my palms. I should have been there, I whispered. I should have answered. I know that. The mattress beside me dipped. Just slightly. Just enough to steady me. It didn't feel hostile. Didn't feel like accusation this time. It felt like acknowledgement. A micropause held the room in a strange calm. The air didn't move. The shadows didn't shift. Even my breathing felt suspended. I knew something was coming. Something inevitable. Something the house had been leading me toward since the first night. So I set my alarm for 2:55 a.m., tucked my notebook under the pillow, turned off the light, and lay down on the bed, his side this time, staring at the ceiling while the cold slowly settled across the room like a thin sheet. I had a plan, fragile as it was. I would face him. I would finally listen. I would finally answer the calls I ignored. But as my eyes drifted toward the open door, a thought crept in that made my heart stumble. What if what came at 3 a.m. wasn't only Mark? What if something else latched onto the anger between us, twisting it into something neither living nor dead? Still, I stayed. I had to. Whatever waited at 3 a.m., I was going to meet it head on. The alarm never got the chance to ring. I woke up at 2:59 a.m. wide awake, heart pounding, like something had pulled me up from the bottom of a dark lake. The room was freezing, colder than any night before, colder than winter storms, colder than hospital tiles. My breath came out in white clouds, slow, unsteady. The clock on the nightstand glowed red in the darkness, 2:59, 3 o'clock. And the bedroom door, the one I had left only slightly open, swung wider. Not fast, not violently. It opened with the slow, silent certainty of something that knew the house better than I ever had. I sat up. I didn't run. I didn't scream. This was what I had promised. The air thickened, pressing against my skin like invisible hands. I could feel him, Mark, but heavier, denser, like he pulled something with him. A shadow stretched into the room, tall, uneven, familiar in shape, wrong in movement. I couldn't speak at first. My throat locked. My lungs stuttered. Then, soft footsteps, dragging. One step. Pause. Another. Exactly his cadence, but slower. Weighted. Almost pained. Mark. The name slipped out before I could control it. The footsteps stopped at the foot of the bed. The darkness there was thick, too thick, like the air was folding in on itself. Then the mattress dipped. Hard. Heavy. Like someone had dropped to their knees right beside me. I couldn't see him, but I felt him. A pressure inches from my legs. A presence I'd known for 20 years, twisted now into something sharp. A whisper broke through the cold. Not in my ears, inside my mind. Faint, cracking, desperate. Why didn't you answer me? My breath hitched. Tears burned instantly. I'm here now, I whispered. I'm listening. Please, please tell me what you want me to see. The air convulsed, a sharp, freezing jolt across my chest, and suddenly the room flickered. Like a bad connection. Like reality was phasing. I saw the moment. The hospital. The machine lights. His hand reaching for mine. And me, turning away. Bailey. Just enough for him to see. No, I choked. Mark, I didn't mean. The mattress jerked. A violent, shaking movement. The shadow at the foot of the bed stretched upward, unfolding into a shape too tall for him, taller than any person should be. Its head tilted. Too far. Too slow. Like a marionette pulled by hesitant strings. A deep, rattling sound filled the room. Not breathing. Not words. A wet, dragging sound, like something was trying to form a voice that wasn't meant to speak anymore. I pressed my back against the wall. My pulse hammered in my throat. Mark, you have to stop, I whispered. You're scaring me. Please. Another whisper cut through the cold, clearer, broken, his voice layered with something darker underneath. You left me. A sharp pain stabbed into my chest. Not physical, memory. The guilt I had buried. The words we exchanged. I know, I sobbed. I know. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The shadow jerked again, closer now. The room flickered. The lights surged, then dimmed. And out of that thick darkness, a faint shape emerged. His outline, his shoulders, his face, but pale, blurred at the edges like wet ink. His eyes, they weren't angry. They were terrified. Lauren, the whisper trembled. I didn't want to die alone. My knees nearly gave out. I reached toward him, slow, shaking, careful, and for a split second, the room warmed. Just a breath. Just enough for me to feel like he was still himself. Then something yanked him backward. Sudden, violent. His shape distorted, stretched, dissolved into the shadows at the foot of the bed. Not like he was disappearing, like he was being pulled. He reached toward me, fingers elongated by the flickering dark. Help me. The cold slammed into me like a wave. The light snapped off. The room disappeared into pitch black. Footsteps thundered around the bed, not his this time. Faster, heavier, chaotic. Something else was in the room. Something that hadn't been there before. Something that wanted him. I screamed his name into the darkness. Ma! A hand, ice cold, too strong, clamped around my ankle that I kicked, clawed, scrambled backward. The grip tightened. Pulled. No. Stop. Let go of him. The hand slipped. The darkness recoiled, like it had been burned. A raw, tearing sound ripped through the room. A howl. Not human. Not him. The lights spiced back on. The room was empty. Silent. Still. Except the indentation on the mattress beside me was deeper than ever. And the cold hadn't faded. Mark was gone. Not crossed over. Not at peace. Taken. The house around me hummed with a pressure so intense it made my teeth ache. Whatever had been pulling at him, whatever had attached itself to his anger and guilt, it wasn't finished, and neither was I. I didn't move for a long time after the lights came back on. Not because I couldn't, but because the silence felt too fragile to break. The cold still gripped the room, but the pressure, the heaviness, it was gone. Whatever had pulled Mark away had retreated just as suddenly as it came, leaving me sitting on the bed, shaking, staring at the deep imprint beside me where he had been. The room felt bruised, like something unseen had crashed through it and left invisible damage behind. Eventually, my body remembered how to breathe, how to stand, how to walk without collapsing. I went downstairs on autopilot, flicking on every light as I moved. I didn't care how irrational it was. Darkness had taken enough from me. I wasn't giving it another inch. The living room felt the same as always, but I wasn't. My whole body trembled, a deep tremor that came from bone-level shock. My throat tasted metallic. My hands were raw from clawing at the carpet when something grabbed me. But the house was quiet. Not the tense, listening quiet from before. Just normal quiet. For the first time since the funeral, the silence wasn't waiting for anything. I sat down on the couch and wrapped myself in a blanket, but no amount of warmth could settle the ache inside me. Not the physical ache, though that was there too, but the deeper one, the one lodged somewhere between regret and clarity. I kept seeing his face, not the blurred shadow version, not the terrified, distorted one, but him, my Mark, the man I married, the man I fought with, the man I loved even when anger drowned out everything else. He hadn't appeared to hurt me. He hadn't reached across the boundary between life and death because he was vengeful. He had been scared, confused, alone, and something had taken advantage of that. My chest tightened with a grief so sharp it almost doubled me over. The kind of grief that has no tears left, just aching space. The house stayed still. Hours passed. The sun crept up through the blinds, turning the living room walls a soft gold. Another micropause. A moment suspended in a strange, gentle quiet. I don't know how long I sat there before I realized something important. The activity had stopped. Completely. No footsteps. No whispers. No cold bursts of air. No door slowly creaking open at 3 a.m. It was as if once whatever was here took him, or whatever was here was repelled. The house finally let go of its tension. But peace isn't the same as closure. Not even close. I stood and paced the room, trying to piece things together. What happened at 3 a.m. hadn't just been a haunting, it was a struggle. A tug-of-war for a soul that never should have lingered. And I couldn't shake the horrible truth that whispered through my mind. If I had answered his calls. If I had gone home sooner. If I had held his hand in the hospital instead of letting anger freeze me. Maybe he would have crossed peacefully. Maybe nothing would have followed him back. Maybe there never would have been anything to take him. I pressed my palms to my face and exhaled shakily. Regret doesn't bring the dead back. But it roots itself deep, like ivy curling around the ribs. Later that afternoon, I finally went upstairs to the bedroom again. I expected some change, something broken, misplaced, overturned, anything to prove I hadn't imagined the violence of the night. But everything sat exactly where it had always been. Except the bed. The indentation was still there. Not deep like it had been when the force pulled him, but faint. Soft. The kind of small dip a person leaves when they first sit beside you. Just a moment. Just long enough to listen. I lowered myself onto the edge of the bed. The mattress shifted slightly, settling beneath my weight. I hope you're okay, I murmured into the quiet room. Wherever you are. I hope you're not scared anymore. A gentle warmth brushed the back of my arm. Not a burst, not a chill, just warmth. Soft, human-like. I didn't time. I didn't reach. I just let it sit there for a moment. A fragile goodbye. A moment of forgiveness neither of us got to speak in life. Then the warmth faded. Naturally, peacefully, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the bedroom take a real breath. That night, I slept in the guest room, not out of fear, but because the bedroom felt like sacred ground now. A place where final things had happened. A place where I needed time before stepping into it again. No doors opened. No footsteps came. No cold swept through the hall. At 3 a.m., I woke on my own. Not from a presence. Not from dread. Just naturally. I listened to the quiet. The safe quiet. The kind that doesn't expect anything from you. I whispered into the dark, "Good night, Mark." No answer. And somehow, that silence hurt, but also healed. Because I understood whatever held him here was gone. And whatever waited beyond, he was finally moving toward it. It's strange how a house can feel different once the dead finally leave it behind. Not because of anything dramatic. No sudden warmth, no cinematic sigh of relief. It's quieter in a way that's hard to explain. Quieter in my mind, not just in the walls. For weeks after that final night, I moved carefully through each room, expecting echoes to return, half bracing for shadows that never came. I opened the bedroom door every morning, waiting to feel that cold rush of air against my face. But the air stayed still. The door never moved on its own again. At first, the normalcy felt unsettling. I had grown so used to being watched, followed, touched by something I couldn't see. I'd adapted to fear the way people adapt to background noise, constant but survivable. When the haunting ended, the silence felt like a void. Too big, too empty, like losing Mark all over again. I spent days walking through the house with a strange ache in my chest. Not dread, never that again, but a kind of quiet longing, a wondering, a hoping. Had he found peace? Was he still afraid somewhere? Did he understand that I would have changed everything if I could have? Grief is made of 1,000 questions you'll never get answers to. Hauntings aren't much different. A few weeks later, I decided to fix up the bedroom. Not to erase what happened, nothing could, but to reclaim it in a gentle way. I washed the bedding, repainted the walls a softer color, opened the windows to let fresh air in. For the first time in months, the room didn't feel charged. It felt honest, like a space that had seen the worst and survived it. While cleaning, I found Mark's old sweatshirt tucked behind the dresser. I held it against my chest and sat on the edge of the bed. It didn't smell like him anymore, not really. But I closed my eyes and remembered the weight of his shoulder against mine, the way he breathed when he fell asleep, The way he'd whisper, "It's fine, Law," even when it wasn't. Those memories weren't haunting. They were the pieces of him I got to keep. One night, weeks after everything had quieted, I sat on the porch and watched the sunset behind the neighborhood rooftops. The sky turned that dim gold he always liked, and for a moment, I felt something warm settle near me. Close, peaceful. Not a spirit, not a ghost, just a memory that didn't hurt anymore. It was then that I understood what I had been left with. Mark hadn't stayed behind to punish me. He hadn't crossed the boundary between life and death to make me relive our worst moments. He came because he was scared and reaching, because he didn't know how to let go without hearing me say that I still cared. And even though something darker tried to take him, something that fed on fear and fractured emotions, I believe, truly, that he fought his way free the moment he saw me trying to reach him back. Whatever happens after we die, whatever waits, whatever pulls or guides us, he wasn't alone when he left. That matters to me, more than the fear, more than the guilt, more than the haunting itself. I learned something in all of this, something simple but unbearably hard to accept. When we hold on to anger instead of love, the echoes don't stop just because someone's heart does. They linger, they twist, they become doorways for things we never intended to invite. If you love someone, say it. If you're hurt, speak it. If you can forgive, don't wait. Time is fragile, and final words have a way of following us far longer than we ever think they will. I still talk to Mark sometimes, not because I expect him to answer, but because the act of speaking fills the silence he once filled. It keeps me honest with myself. It keeps me grounded. And every now and then, when I pass the bedroom door, I swear I feel the faintest trace of warmth brush my arm. Not cold, not fear, just warmth. Brief, like someone walking past you on their way out. The moral, if there is one, is this: don't wait until the dead are gone to make peace, because sometimes they come back looking for it, and the living have to be brave enough to give it. Did you like my story? Please like and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far this story of mine travels.